Hello, everyone. Welcome to Charlotte Wildlife Stewards, our September program. We're starting off our new season, and we're so happy that you're here. We are the Charlotte chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, and you can see on the screen our website and our email. And at the end of the program, I'll attempt to come back to that so you can see it. We're on social media, so you can find us there. As well as on our website. So our mission is to create, preserve, protect wildlife habitat through education, engagement, and enjoyment. And here are a few pictures that show you how we do that. We have a lot of work that we do, a lot of planning, but we also have a lot of fun. So we hope that maybe one day you might join us in this. So this past weekend, the North Carolina Wildlife Federation had the Governor's Conservation Achievement Awards. And several of us from our chapter were able to go, as well as other chapters from around the state. It was an opportunity to have some education sessions together, to network, to meet each other. We had a banquet where we honored the recipients, and one of those, where is it, is our very own Ernie McLaney. Ernie is he was awarded the Volunteer of the Year Award, and he more than deserves it. He's been a longtime member of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. He started our chapter in 2013. He was president for 5 years and finally got someone to take that over for a few years who did a wonderful job. He lives and breathes conservation and sustainability, focuses on connecting children, well, really with everybody, with nature, and it's important in our lives. And this was really a well-deserved honor for Ernie. So yay, Ernie. He's been an inspiration for me. Another winner at the awards was the Concord Wildlife Alliance. They're our sister chapter that's based in Cabarrus County. They won 2021 Chapter of the Year. And, you know, this was a challenging year for everybody, but they still found ways to have programs and activities. Like many, they switched to online for their programs. But in addition to that, they did a lot of hands-on work. They helped create and certify wildlife habitats in their community. They had several events where they collected trash, which is, I mean, that's one of the things that unfortunately we just have to do to help protect our environment. They also planted trees, and that's a great way to help wildlife as well as all of us. And they engage the community in a lot of conservation topics. So we're just real happy to have them joining us tonight. They actually canceled their September program, which I believe was supposed to be in person. So anyway, we're happy to have them joining us for this program tonight. So one of the things that we're working on as a chapter is getting more volunteer engagement, and we're working on creating a volunteer pool. What we want is just to have a group of people that are willing to volunteer. When we have different events or programs, there's no obligation. It's just, you know, a group of people we can send out a request to, and if it's in your interest and you're available and you want to participate, then, you know, you answer back and you do that. Some of the events that we're going to have coming up for this are pollinator garden installations, habitat restoration program, which is, you've heard us talk before about trees for trash. Well, it's the same thing. We're just sort of migrating to a little bit different name, but for every 25 pounds of trash that gets picked up and reported in to the North Carolina Wildlife Federation through their website, that will plant one tree, a native tree, I should point out, a native shrub, or 10 pollinator plants somewhere in North Carolina. The other thing we have is Wild on the Water. That's our paddling event on Mountain Island Lake. It's our fundraiser. But there are a lot of pieces to it that need to come together, and a lot of times we need some extra hands to help pull it off. And then last, I have listed here is Kids in Nature Day. That's coming up this coming Sunday, and I'll talk a little more about that. We've had a great response for volunteers to help with that. Say, oh, and then The other is just other events and activities as they come up. Now I can't see what's on that other, it's behind Erin. Oh, well, we'll go on. One of the other things that our chapter focuses on is wildlife habitat. As everybody in Charlotte and even Cabarrus County knows, and other places in the state, development happens. And one of the things we're working on is helping people realize that we can still have green spaces, whether it's in public spaces or own private spaces. Our private property is where we have the most control. And the things, it's really easy to provide these things, regardless of whether you have 2 acres or just a regular old backyard or a courtyard. So that's food. You can see this is actually someone's certified wildlife habitat. So she's got food in the form of these plants, these black-eyed Susans, and some other things in there. Water. She's got a bird bath. There are plenty of trees and shrubbery around where the wildlife can raise their young or find shelter. And I happen to know this person, and she uses sustainable practices, which means no pesticides, very limited use of herbicides. Other things you can do is have a rain barrel you can compost. Those are just some examples. It's a program of the of the National Wildlife Federation, and the website where you can go and get more information is down there. Or of course, you can reach out to us, and we will help you with advice and pointing you in the right direction on how to do this. And I will throw out that so far as plants that you put in your yard or wherever, is we really encourage using native species of plants, because the insects and the wildlife and the plants have all evolved together. And I'll put in a plug for the UNCC Botanical Gardens. They're having their plant sale, which includes lots of native selections, and it's open to members, the Botanical Garden members only, on September 30th, and then open to the public October 1st and 2nd. So look up their website for those details. Okay, Kids in Nature Day. So this is a really fun event where we bring together lots of different organizations to present hands-on activities. It's all about being active and getting your hands on nature. And like I said, we've had a great response for volunteers. We're going to have animal-themed yoga. We're going to have fishing. We're going to have hiking. We're going to have mammal skulls and pelts. Gosh, it's just, I can't even remember how many different things that we're going to have. All of the crafts are going to be made with things from nature. We're going to have a nature play area where everything is like sticks and pine cones and leaves and all kinds of stuff that a lot of it's stuff we found in our yard. So it's a good way to learn about what's just right outside your door that you can play with. So it is this coming Sunday. I encourage you to come. Kids of all ages. So even if you don't have kids, come. And one thing I don't have on this slide is that in the interest of being safe, and because children cannot be vaccinated, we are asking people to wear masks. All of our volunteers and participants will be in masks, so we ask that you do that also. And we have a few things coming up. Well, one of the things that's really ongoing is this group book read, and every month one of our members post on our social media a book to read that's usually tied to whatever our topic is. And this one, the optimistic environmentalist, he's talking about the good things that are happening in the environmental movement. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there, but there's a lot of positive work going on too, and that's the focus of this book. Our October program, we're going to be welcoming Charlotte Mecklenburg Stormwater, and they're going to be sharing some of their habitat restoration projects and how those benefit wildlife. And then another event that we'll need some volunteers for is planting a pollinator garden, or actually adding to the pollinator garden at the Eastway Regional Recreation Center. And there will be more information coming on that on our website. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ernie, who will introduce our speaker tonight, Erin Schrode. I'm going to make Erin the host.
All right, thank you, Donna. My name is Ernie McClaney, and I'm really ecstatic to welcome our speaker. But before I do that, I want to get some housekeeping. We're going to take your questions at the end of the promotion program, and you can do a couple of things here. We prefer that you type your question into the chat, and the chat is located at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that and type your question in. Once the program is over, in addition to chat, there's a little hand there where you can raise your hand and we'll try to call on you to do your questions. But to help Erin get through her entire program, we're going to let her just go with it. She's got a lot to talk about, and we certainly want to hear every single word she says. Erin, I know your screen's up there and your name, but if you would give us a wave just so people know that that's you. Erin is coming to us live from California, where her home is. And if you haven't been to her website, please at least Google Erin Schrode, S-C-H-R-O-D-E, and your Google results will just explode across your screen. Erin is an activist and social entrepreneur. She's a leading voice on sustainability, social impact, and millennials, and a vocal advocate for environmental action, public health, and equal justice. She recently ran an unprecedented campaign for U.S. Congress in California to redefine civic engagement and reinvigorate a culture of public service. In 2005, she co-founded a website and a nonprofit called Turning Green. She has developed eco-education and action platforms to inspire, educate, mobilize millions of students and global masses with this nonprofit and beyond. Now, listen to this part. Erin speaks and consults internationally. She's contributed to ABC, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Refinery 29, and is frequently tapped for and featured in the New York Times, Vanity Fair, CNN, NBC, Fox, 17, Forbes, and it goes on. As a community organizer, Erin champions civic leadership and environmental stewardship worldwide, launching a youth education project in Haiti, writing curriculum for Eco Center in Palestinian Israel and Jordanian students, developing recycling infrastructure in Ghana, and telling stories of Syrian refugees in the Mediterranean and Middle East, as well as Native Americans at Standing Rock. Erin is a bold innovator and a lifelong journey to inspire and mobilize people to discover and activate passion for social impact and policy change. And that's just a fraction of what Erin is involved in these days. I'm really thankful, Erin, that you took time out of your busy schedule, particularly today with your state's governor issues going on, to share with us your passion, your message, and your hope for environmental justice and the fact that we should all be involved and step up and help. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernie. Incredible, kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here with all of you. I loved just getting to learn a little bit more from Donna, and I'm just going to get my screen share up here. There we go. When I was first talking to Ernie about coming and speaking with all of you, this was an idea that he put out. What is an environmental activist, and who is an environmental activist? Can you be an environmental activist? And to that, I have a resounding yes. And then the natural question is, but how? And so I'm really looking forward to, over the next 30, 40 minutes or so, sharing with all of you a little bit of my story. And I think, an unlikely story of an environmental activist driven by passion and purpose. And I'm looking out my window at the redwoods right now by where I was born, where I was raised. So to begin, I want to rewind. About 30 years, my mom was pregnant with me, and she read a book called Diet for a Poisoned Planet. And my father was a teacher, and he'd gone to school. And by the time he returned home, she had completely transformed the entire house. Packaged food was out and organic food was in, and plastic and disposables were out and glass and reusables were in. And she started cleaning with lemon and vinegar. And that was literally the world into which I was born. And growing up, we did all the things that Donna was saying. We did the cleanups and the gardening days, and we went to the events and the marches and the rallies. And at school, we had a dock where we did science experiments in the Bay. I was shaped so fundamentally by Northern California. Specifically, I grew up between Marin and Sonoma County. Marin has the highest concentration of organic farms of any county in the US. It's considered the birthplace of mountain biking up on Mount Tamalpais. It's surrounded on three sides by water, by the bay and the ocean. And I never took it for granted, but these environmental stewardship and conservation principles were literally a part of me since day one. And when I was about 11 years old, a study came out that Marin County, this idyllic place that I am proud to be from, where I live, where I love, had the highest breast, prostate, and melanoma cancer rates in the world. That breast cancer rates had risen 60% in 8 years, and no one knew why. And Marin is also one of the most affluent counties in California. And my mother's friends were being diagnosed with cancer and going through chemotherapy, my friends' parents. And they said, sorry, there's not enough money to do the testing. And that didn't sit right with my mom. And I saw her spring into grassroots activist mode. I saw her organize literally a door-to-door walk with 3,000 volunteers to go to 50,000 households and ask a very simple question. Why? Why were cancer rates off the charts? Why were we facing this public health crisis? And everybody had different answers. It was about the water. It was about the demographics. It was a plane that crashed off the Farallon Islands. It was uranium barrels sunk after World War II. And nothing correlated. They worked with the UCSF Department of Epidemiology, specifically at environmental risk factors, at lifestyle risk factors, at exposures. And I saw, at the ripe old age of 11 at that point, a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens changing the world. And this quote from Margaret Mead was actually on the wall of my first grade classroom. Gives you a little more insight into the type of schools I went to growing up. But I saw that power firsthand, focused on environmental justice, on sustainability, on public health. And I kept hearing about larger environmental issues. I was hearing about global warming, about climate change. And at that point, it seemed so inaccessible to my then, 13-year-old mind. I couldn't put back together melting polar ice caps. I couldn't take my house off the grid. I didn't own a house. I couldn't get a hybrid car. I didn't even have my permit. What could I do? How could I be that environmental activist? To go back to the question I was asking at the beginning. And this graphic was shared with me, a student in Australia years ago. And I think it's very powerful. If you think of any issue and you put that at the center and you build a map, there are a multitude of ways to address any problem, be it an environmental problem, a climate problem, a conservation problem, or any other issue that you're tackling. And all of the things around the outside are not going to appeal to everyone, but chances are that something is going to appeal to everyone. And maybe if they enter one place, they'll be pulled in and there are more. And so some of these seemed more accessible to my young self. And at that time, a study came out, not a scientist, but I read these were mainstream, linking the ingredients in personal care products to cancer and birth defects and environmental addiction. And I thought, hold on. I eat organic food. I drink out of my reusable bottle. I carpool. I recycle. I clean up. I do the things that I've been told to do, but never had I stopped to think about what I was putting on my body every single day. And I thought, well, if I don't know this, my peers probably don't. And so we came together in January 2005, what was then a bunch of ragtag teens, and it was called Safe Cosmetics 101. And our mission was just to educate. And the response was universal. What do you mean no one's looking out for our health and that of the environment? What do you mean there's no government oversight, right? What can we do? And that's the beauty in the naivete of youth. I was actually just on a call with a bunch of our students earlier. This grew into what's now a 16-and-a-half-year-old nonprofit, Turning Green. And we have a new crop, right? It's young people. That passion is literally the strongest renewable resource that we have. But we came together to start to tackle what was a very local public health and environmental. But then we started looking and going deeper. And I think, all of you, the issues that you're tackling, I'm not going to come in to Charlotte, to North Carolina, to your community and say, here's the issue that's plaguing you guys. Here's how you're going to tackle it. But you are experts in your own environment, literally and figuratively, just as we were here growing up in Northern California at that time. And that's what we need people to do more of. It's something I call mining your life. It's going through and looking at all of the challenges around you that you can identify and turning those into opportunities for solutions. Because that is something that you will be able to do more efficiently, more effectively, with greater relevance than any outsider. It doesn't mean we can't idea share. It doesn't mean best practices don't absolutely overlap. But this idea of, thinking global and acting local, and then expanding back to global has always been a driving force and a key piece of Turning Green. So we were focused specifically on a younger demographic and these issues, and how do you make the environment, the climate, the globe broken down into things that young people can address on a day-to-day basis. So we started developing programs that focused on things like school lunch, to delve more into food and agriculture, because that was something that all of us shared every day. Using dorm as this emblematic experience to dive into home and space and one's surroundings. Talking about fashion to go deeper into the textile movement. And making it snappy and making it fun and creating these great events. And our signature program is something called Project Green Challenge. And Project Green Challenge is a 30-day program focused on climate justice, sustainability, and public health, our pillars, that breaks down so many of these large themes into individual days with 3 challenges. And we've had over 290,000 high school and college students participate in this over the past 10 years, every October, over 30 days. When you think, what do you do every day for 30 days? What do you do every day? It's not a lot. And if you actually want to change habits, if you want to break and recreate neurological pathways of our constituents, we all, right? It's brainwashing, it's mind melding for good, how we want to reach you guys and all of your audiences and go on a journey. So we call it from conventional to conscious, and everyone falls somewhere on the arc. No one's 0, no one's 100, nothing's evil, nothing's perfect. And how do you bring people on that journey, knowing that it's very nonlinear, but keep them going in a trajectory of greater sustainability, greater health, greater justice, greater safety for people and planet? And for us, Project Green Challenge has been an amazing entry point. Again, kind of like that map with global warming at the center. Not everybody's going to resonate with all of these, but if you pull them in, it's a slippery slope towards that journey of environmental activism. And when students start this, they certainly don't consider themselves an environmental activist, but developing the tools, the skill sets, and the community. That's why I'm so excited to be here with all of you, seeing that you're not alone, that there are other like-minded people, especially as a student, as a young person, maybe who didn't grow up in Northern California, who wasn't raised by an environmental activist mother, to meet your peers and to be able to build connection and community across space is really powerful. So Project Green Challenge is all digital. Obviously, so much of what we're doing, particularly in the past year and a half, has been digital, but it's an amazing way to unite people. But we do live in the physical space. And I love that, even now you guys continue to host events because it's so important to do and to see and to touch and to feel, and something we do every year, save the past 2 years. So hopefully we'll resume is showing up on campuses. And we do something called the Conscious College Road Tour, where we crisscross the country and we show up and we say, what does environmentalist, eco, upcycled, recycled look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? How does it enter into my life? And to set up in the heart of college campuses that have, 120,000 students or 2,000 students and pull people in is really powerful. And you start these dialogues with people who know absolutely nothing about sustainability. One of my favorite experiences, I was at Jackson State in Mississippi, and a student came up and said, so this is the composting thing, right? And I said, well, composting is a piece of it, but let's talk more, to take students on a journey around food and to talk about bulk, excited to talk about hemp and the solutions that poses, to talk about, reusables. You see a lot of that in these photos, and to make it fun and to make it accessible and to make it relevant. And I think we're all so busy in our day-to-day. So for us, we focus on, I don't want to call food a simple thing, but something like food. What you see on the top is what they like to call a standard American diet, the acronym being SAD. It's sad. That is, Michael Pollan has a great quote. He says, simply don't eat anything your great grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. And I guarantee there's stuff in that top shelf that my great grandmother would not recognize. Now, is everything on the bottom perfect? No, but is it more fresh, more local, more organic, more nutritious? Yes. So again, conventional to conscious is an arc, not a binary. And how do we pull people in that direction where you can actually read labels? You don't need a magnifying glass and a decoder to know what you're eating. Simple things like a PB&J. We build these infographics and we use them in cafeterias and campuses where we work. What should be in a PB&J? What should be in an apple? An apple. Yet a conventional apple on average has a residue of 42 pesticides. So we've gotten so far away from what could be and what food can be. So that's what goes in you, right? That's food. And people, I think, more viscerally understand food. It comes from the soil. You grow it, you cultivate it, you eat it. It affects your energy, your skin, your waistline. And then composting back, that biological nutrient cycle is something that's easy to talk about, the effects on health. But what about what goes on you and body care? The average woman uses about 200 chemical ingredients on her body every day. The average man about 125. Most of them that we're completely unaware, we're this human petri dish, and these toxins are being accumulated and bioaccumulated in our body, 89% of which have never been tested for human or environmental safety. So that's not just what goes onto us, like the food. It's the pesticides and the chemicals that then run off down our drains, storm drains, into oceans, into groundwater, into agricultural water. And then what goes around us, cleaning products. And, I speak a lot to young students and have some, props, and I'll throw one out in the audience and they'll turn it over and they'll go, why is there a skull and crossbones? If you give it to a group of adults, we look at it and say, oh, that's commonplace. No, things that poison us and poison smaller, more susceptible bodies should not be on the market. And when you think about this, moreover, more than us, it's the people that are using products in high concentration at close proximity over and over again. This isn't just a public health issue. This is a justice issue. This isn't just an environmental issue. It's an environmental justice issue. So when you think about the populations that bear the brunt of these toxins, how do we rectify that situation as well? When we work with students or with anyone, I think it's really easy to get siloed into thinking, okay, well, you're a consumer or you're a maker or you're, just this, you're a parent. No, you're everything. And you have to speak to people's full identity because that all fits into being an environmental activist. And everyone has skill sets and experiences to bring to the table. There's a phenomenal video series I highly suggest you watch. It's called The Story of Stuff, created by Annie Leonard, who now runs Greenpeace USA. And she talks about flexing your citizen muscle and your consumer muscle. We can't shop our way out of this environmental problem. It's not just about changing our behavior, not even about shifting massive corporations or industry. It's also about advocacy and changing the laws, because too many people will not protect environmental health or public health if they are not mandated to do so. And so the first time that I testified before our California Congress, I wasn't old enough to vote, and realized though that I and we, our peers, had a powerful perspective and an important voice for these legislators to hear. So we lobbied for bills around cosmetics and green chemistry, nothing that is going to fundamentally save the world, nothing that's going to reverse climate change and environmental degradation, but small things that add up. And so goes California, so goes a nation. If you have a local advocacy initiative, wherever you are in a city, it's going to expand to a state, and then it's going to go federal. So there's opportunities. People aren't necessarily going to change their practices for a small area and not for larger. And so much policy, particularly on environment, is controlled at the state level. And that's why local advocacy is absolutely critically important. I'm so proud of all of the work that we've done. And not even just in California, in Marin County, in our cities and our towns, to change it. We do a lot of work with schools on a district level. You cannot replicate something until it's been done. You can't scale something that doesn't exist. So starting is so important. And that begins in Charlotte, that begins in North Carolina. For me, it began in Marin, it began in California. It's wherever you are with the tools that you have access to, you can become an environmental activist. So now I want to take it bigger. I talked a lot about local, a lot about where we began, because I think it's so important to understand that all of us are shaped by where we live and by these experiences around us. But environmentalism knows no bounds of geography, of race, of socioeconomic status. And I had the privilege of getting a scholarship to go to NYU, New York University. And one of the reasons that I chose NYU was because of this incredible global network of campuses that NYU has. And I thought I wanted, the world to be my campus, and studied abroad for 5 terms. I did college very unconventionally, but everywhere I went, environmentalism is the lens through which I see the world. And I took on environmental challenges around the globe, but with that same local perspective. So I want to share some of those with you right now, because it was about awakening environmental activists, not only in me, but in people in all of these places where I was going. The first semester that I spent abroad was in Ghana, in West Africa, and I got to Accra. And one of the first things that I saw, literally driving around a bus, looking down at the gutters and the curbs and the sidewalks, were these sachets. The ones that you're seeing in this picture are for ice cream, but that's also how people drink water in a great portion of the world. And they were just discarded. And I said, well, what's happening? Where do they come from? Where do they go? And there was a man who lived in Ghana, Stuart, who was collecting these sachets, washing them in reclaimed water, drying them, harvesting the power of the sun, and stitching them together into what he called trashy bags. And I said, Stuart, you have enough raw material to last you generations. How are you addressing the problem? And so we started to go around to schools to talk to young people about how they could be a part of the solution. And every time I go in and say, hey, do you guys see these bags? And they go, oh yeah, like pure water. They see, a foreign person, they think aid worker, they think, purified water. I say, what do you do when you're done drinking the water? It should be blank stares. I say, do you ever see them again? And you get like the hands eventually. Oh yeah, I was at the beach and my feet got caught in them walking through the sand. Oh yeah, I was at my grandma's and it rained and the gutters overflowed because they were clogged with these bags. And you see these young people start to make the connections around environmentalism. And every time, without fail, students would run into the schoolyard and come in with armfuls saying, what can we do? The same question that we asked ourselves as 13-year-olds when faced with a public and environmental health crisis in our community, these young people, literally on the other side of the world, were asking themselves and finding that power to be an environmental activist within. And from Ghana, I went and I studied abroad in the Middle East, and I built out the curriculum for the first eco-education center, first environmental center in the Palestinian Authority that brought together Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian youth around issues of shared natural resources. And I had never thought about environmentalism as a means of peace building and conflict resolution, but I built out this curriculum focused on 4 themes: garden, gray water, recycling, and water. And it was fascinating to hear and hear of these dialogues occurring where these students are going, wait, you're dealing with that issue too? Oh, you use that solution as well? And seeing that these environmental issues, again, know no bounds of race, of religion, of ethnicity, of nationality, and that young people could come together as environmental activists, newfound, self-identified, to build coalitions across those supposed boundaries and dividing lines. And that gave me, and still does, a lot of hope. And I came back. I came back to New York. I lived in New York 8 years after I graduated. And a couple of years after I graduated was the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement. Eric Garner was strangled to death on the streets of New York City by the NYPD. And it was the first time in my life that I took to the streets night after night. This wasn't a one-time march or a rally. And I had friends who said, why, Erin? You're an environmentalist. And I said, to quote MLK, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This wasn't anywhere, this was my city. But if you want to talk about environmentalism, who are the communities that bear the brunt of environmental injustice? They're Black and brown communities in our country. They're the same communities being targeted by these issues around racial justice, and climate justice is racial justice, and racial justice is climate justice. If you think of toxicity dumps, the land that's been given to these populations over time, if you think of where power plants are, emissions, low air quality, access to healthcare, food deserts, chemical plants, you name it, runoff, ag. And so for me, that intersection is where I've spent most of the past few years of my life working, specifically around food and around food justice, as it relates to environmental justice, racial justice, and larger justice in general. One of those journeys took me to Puerto Rico. I lived in Puerto Rico for 2 years after Hurricane Maria, and went there to run a food program called Chefs for Puerto Rico. A dear friend of mine, you might have heard of him, he's a chef named Jose Andres, and went down and started cooking. And Jose said, I need you down here to run it. I have a vision of feeding an island. And I thought I'd be there for a couple of days. 2 years living there, becoming la boricua, sort of a boricua gringuita. But what we got to do very quickly, as soon as we could, I organized farmers. I said, how do we focus on building in food sovereignty and food security and food independence into this larger equation by literally elevating the people who are stewarding the land, on this island. And I think that farmers play such a key role in all of these issues around environmentalism, around health, around justice, that it inspires me to be able to work there with 3 million American citizens on this island, focused on how we steward the land and create systems that are resilient, particularly in a place that's so susceptible to heightened, intense weather phenomenon as we face the impacts of climate. So I've been literally doing environmental work across the country, around the world, and back again. But coming back to my hometown, coming back to Marin County, there's a town called Marin City. And Marin City is a historically marginalized, predominantly African-American community. It's an exit off the freeway. It's one exit away from where I live. It's actually where my mother sent me to preschool. And in Marin City, students were being fed the worst of the worst food, worse than airplane food, heat and serve. The kitchens had no capacity to cook. And with our nonprofit, with Turning Green, we launched a program called Conscious Kitchen, which addresses food equity, access, and education by building in eco supply chains and nutrition literacy into school meals. We focus on 5 key terms. The students love this acronym. We call it FLOSSN, fresh, local, organic, seasonal, nutritious. And Conscious Kitchen started in a school where 95% of the kids qualify for free and reduced lunch at Bayside MLK Academy in Marin City. We've grown, and during the pandemic, during the pandemic, we served 18.7 million meals to students, injecting over $10 million into local organic farms and food businesses. And for me, that's what's so exciting about food as a part of the solution. It's that food comes from the soil. It comes from, I could talk about soil all day, but literally this thing that has the potential to be one of our greatest hopes against climate change and in mitigation techniques. And so for us to get to educate the youngest, the elementary school students, to get them excited knowing where their food comes from and why this matters, is literally why I do what I do. And I think sometimes the size and scope of climate degradation, of climate change, can become really inaccessible, really overwhelming, really anxiety producing. And there's this phrase and this concept that I think about a lot in my head. I am but one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And just because I cannot do everything does not mean I will not do something. And the I am but one is kind of liberating, right? There's 7+ billion other people. There are dozens of, us on this call. There are thousands of people in our communities. There are other people that can pick up the slack. There are other people that can do. You can take a day off. You can pause. You don't have to have the answer to everything. You don't have to get involved in all the causes, but you are one. So what happens if you do? What happens if you start? What happens if you begin? And I thought about that a lot a couple of years ago when I did pretty much the most unreasonable thing, to use a George Bernard Shaw quote, I could think of, which is that I launched a campaign locally for Congress here in California, 2nd. And I knew why I was doing what I was doing. There were a lot of, people and a lot of talk. I was 24 years old at the time. And what is a 24-year-old doing running for Congress? And for me, I was very clear in my why. I was steadfast. Environmental and public health was pillar number one. Learning and the future of work, human rights, and tech innovation. We were talking about these issues in ways that made sense to people. Yes, the campaign went mega viral. It was a 24, I turned 25 in the middle of the run, running for office. But we were up and down this district talking about what mattered to people. People said, we've never seen someone who looks like us, who talks like us, who remotely understands what it's like to be us running for office. So we need more people to get involved at the grassroots level and the policy level. I love Ernie said something about, how I'm passionate about social impact and policy change. It's bottom up, it's top down, it's sideways in, it's inside out, it's everything. So yes, you can be an environmental, are an environmental activist, and you must be an environmental activist. And I'll leave you with 3 questions that I think about a lot in deciding what to do, what order to do it, what to prioritize, if I can take something on, if I'm going to stay the course. What am I most passionate about? Where can I have the greatest impact? And what best sets me up for a lifetime of service? I hope you guys can see my passion. I love what I do. I wouldn't do it if I didn't. And there are a few things that I'm more passionate about than habitable, just earth for us and for future generations. Impact, real impact, not just patting yourself on the back, not just walking away feeling good, but legacy, actually ensuring that what you're doing meets the needs of the moment, of the communities, of the place and the time. And service. The business of world changing is long and it's messy, and it's not going to be accomplished in our lifetime. And if we're only shooting for our lifetime, we're not dreaming big enough. And so stepping stones that allow us to galvanize, that allow us to feel like we've had impact and succeeded, but also keep us going for many, many generations to come. And if you think about everything in the world, everything that's possible, what you can fathom within your own frame of reference, what you avoid, what you procrastinate, what you overthink, when it gets down to what you actually do, it's just this tiny little speck. And that's what we need more people to go for. We need people to start, to remember that we are able, that we are capable, and that we're environmental activists, taking it on in the best way we can, where we are, with all we have. And I'm so inspired by the work that you guys are doing in Charlotte. I wish I could come and mask up and be out there with you guys, and I hope I will be in the future. But thank you for having me with you. Thank you for more importantly, stepping up. And I'm excited that I now get to actually talk, we can engage and have some Q&A.
Well, Erin, thank you so much. You really are an inspirational person. I don't know how you have the ideas and energy. I know there's the grand need, but to step up as you did and put your passion out there for everybody to absorb is just amazing to us. We have some questions coming up, but one thing I want to ask to kick it off, if my viewers here don't mind, we have a lot of people here in Charlotte that seem to be just incredibly busy with things that are preventing them from making the choice to get involved in what we consider to be crucial. And Donna had touched on this as environmental stewards. You have the soccer moms, you have the baseball games, football. I got to do my yoga thing, meetings and other programs. How do you reach people who tell you that they're too busy, they just don't have time to do this?
Yeah, really, really important question. And we're all busy, but my favorite thing is when I go and I talk to 8th graders and they tell me how busy they are. And I talk to high school students and they tell me how busy they are. And I say sort of, just you wait. So you mentioned soccer moms, you mentioned, sports parents. And immediately I go, well, a campaign, my mom was the mom who showed up with reusables there, who showed up with the local and the seasonal fruit. How do you build out campaigns like we've done with students around things that they're already doing? I think people are so busy that sometimes adding something feels like a burden or feels impossible. But what if you layer on a filter? What if you say, keep doing what you're doing, but we're going to offer an opportunity for you to do it in a more environmentally conscious way, in a way that also stewards the earth. So building out sort of toolkits and action steps that they can take in their day-to-day life that allow them to do what they're doing with the knowledge that you will provide in a way that is more climate friendly, that is more healthy, that is more sustainable. Because I think also just relevance, it's messaging matters, and breaking things down and saying, you can do one thing, do one thing, DOT, and then you can start to connect the dots. And I think, so much of what you're doing is critical in offering people a wide menu of, here are a bunch of things and you can show up, but also coming to them and just thinking about, like we did, the super busy high school student, the super busy college student, what do they already do, so that we can just make it a little bit more wildlife, eco, climate friendly. All right, I see questions. Should I just go and take them on?
If you're comfortable with that, if you don't mind reading them and then answering them.
Yeah, so I'll just go in the order that they came up and we'll see where we get. I'll try to keep them short. And also I'm more than happy, Ernie, please feel free to share if people want my information. We can have dialogues, we can continue. So Alden said, speaking of local, why not run for city, county, or state first? It's a great question. It's a question that a lot of people ask me. When I ran, in 2016, I was very involved at the time in refugee work. I was working with refugees, particularly Syrian, Iraqi, and Afghan refugees in Lesbos, Greece, which was the entry point into Europe, and then making their way to continental Europe, and in Jordan, focused on a lot of the environmental issues associated with that, with climate displacement refugees, also with the waste, life jackets, a whole bunch of stuff. And I came back here, and there were a lot of things that spurred me to run sort of a cacophony of life events. But 30 governors were closing their doors to refugees at the time. And this was an issue that was being talked about and thrown around largely at the federal level. I was also very involved in a lot of gender work around women and women's rights and paid leave and family leave. And these were issues that were being controlled at the federal level. So I was working on, at that point, policy and pieces that were federal. I believe fiercely in local. I believe in your PTAs and the supervisors and the city councils and the mayors, and this all matters. So I'm open to, I don't know if and when this is a campaign announcement, I'll run again for something down the line. Maybe I could run in 20 years and still be incredibly young. I'm not in it to make history. I want to make a difference. I'm very involved in our local issues. It's where I chose to run at that moment. It was a seat that I really thought needed dialogue to be shifted around, and I'm really proud of during our campaign, the way we were able to actually make a difference in the campaign timeline. We came up 6.6 points short of advancing, and in the primary, we did better than anybody thought we would do. We got 21,000 votes, and people were estimating about 5K. So I think it's not an issue of first or better or where you start. I think it's about what fits with your expertise, with your passions, with where you're at, and also what fits in the larger political landscape. And yes, I agree. I just saw food issues. I am all the time talking to the local school board, so I get it. Those really, really matter, and the local seats are so important. We have an election today that far too many of my peers and people aren't voting in. And certainly once you get down ballot, people don't do their research in the way that our democracy and our planet demands. Okay, so Erin, hello from Erin to Erin, asked, where has been the best place to meet people with the financial resources to begin the large project you've championed? I'm not, do you want to clarify that a little bit, just so that I best understand, Erin, if you want to type it in the chat, in terms of where to find the funding? Do we think that's what it is, Ernie and Donna? Yeah, okay. So always, let's see. Yes, funding sources, okay. Always a struggle and never seemingly enough. We are a small grassroots nonprofit and are always seeking new sources of funding to power ours. Grants, foundations, writing those grants and applying is certainly a big thing. There is, federal funding from certain environmental agencies that's available. We've also partnered with companies. I think, I talked about your consumer muscle and companies that are doing right by people and planet, not companies that are doing what I call like sticky note sustainability, not to put it on their annual report, not to greenwash, not to pink wash, not to whatever wash, but companies that have environmental sustainability and social justice in their DNA. Because as those companies scale, so too does their opportunity for positive impact in those areas. What I find around funding in general is the more specific you can be in what you are doing, and therefore in the ask you are making, the more likely you are going to be to get a positive response. Also, for better and for worse, tying it to a news peg, tying it to current events, tying it to something that's happening now, because a lot of times philanthropists or businesses or federal agencies will have funding and want to give on that certain cause right here, right now. And how can you stay true to your mission as an individual, as an organization, but meet the need of that moment in a way where you can get access to those funds, but not derail yourself and continue to lead your programming, strengthen your infrastructure, do more, grow your reach and your impact, and not just, waste those funds, but not just use them up one-off and go on, actually channel that so that you can continue to grow. It's a constant struggle though, and I don't purport to be an expert. And I think a lot of people think that in order to be an environmental activist, you need a trust fund. In order to be an environmental activist, you have to be independently wealthy, to have access to this. And case in point, I'd beg to differ. I think a lot of us on this call, but I've made this my life. So has my mom. My mom's worked multiple jobs my whole life as an environmental activist, doing different environmental things. You gotta love what you do and do what you love to stay the course in this movement, but you also have to sustain yourself. And I think it's really important that all of us remember this, whether we're working for environmental organizations or doing it as a side hustle, as a volunteer, as an extracurricular, if you will. It's hard, it's a struggle, but also thinking when we talk about, issues of environmental justice, making sure that everyone has access to healthier environments and healthier ways of life that are more sustainable, and really making sure that also the financial resources are divided equitably among populations that need it and that wouldn't have access to it. And I think that I, as someone who benefit from white privilege and from those systems, can do a lot to channel dollars and ensure that they also get spent by, are directed by, are focused on, are centering voices of Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, Latinx populations that really need to be part and parcel and central to our movements and have been stewarding the environment for generations and also are bearing the brunt of environmental injustice. All right. Thank you. Your comments are very kind, everyone. Chelsea, I would love to talk with you. Ernie can absolutely connect us, I hope. All right, this sounds like a good question to close on, which came from the North Carolina Wildlife Federation itself. when running for office, how did you tie your passions for environmentalism while also catering to the general public who may not care as much for environmental issues? So when I was running for office, somebody said to me early on, what do people really care about? Traffic. And I said, what? I said, traffic. People care about traffic. And I think about that all the time. Driving, getting stuck, the time you have with your children, the time you have at work, the time you're quote unquote wasting in the car, every day commuting there and back. So tying things to roads, to traffic, to time, to this, is tied to traffic. And I think there is some truth in that. That is what people really care about. And there's a lot about, jobs and bringing jobs to where you are, and to talking about building and infrastructure development, all this. But you can tie pretty much anything to anything. And a good politician can tie anything to anything and make the case for it. And so everybody, there's something about the environment that's actionable and relevant to them. And then you can talk about, let's talk about water. Here, we live in a coastal place. So my district is a third of the California coast. It's from the Golden Gate to the Oregon border. It's idyllic, it's beautiful. There are things that are going to happen because the sea levels are going to rise, because coastal weather events are going to get more intense, that we need to speak about mitigation, about adaptation. We can just talk about it as it relates to your house. We can talk about it as it relates to the roads that you drive on every day. We can talk about it as it relates to anything. But I'm going to also speak to you about the rising intensity of weather phenomenon, while speaking about how that's going to impact your every single day. Let's talk about food. You got to eat. Where's food coming from? Okay, well, in our district, we have farms, and we have, local and independent organic farmers who are doing this. Well, what is the impact? I can go on and give you a myriad of examples. But I think that also speaking about, here, the natural parks, the national parks, the wildlife, the state parks, the native species, all of this, wildfires. Hello, like my district is literally on fire. And speaking about that from a lens of environmentalism as it relates to the air that you breathe, that your children are going to school in, that they grow up, and why they're wearing a mask. It's not COVID, it's the wildfires. It's not wildfires, it's COVID. We were wearing N95s years ago here. And so again, it goes to how Ernie, the first question that he asked, how do we get people who think they're busy, who have other priorities in life, who don't see themselves as environmental activists, involved in these movements? And we break it down, and we make it relevant, and we make it accessible, and we make it actionable for them. And I think then you'll find that they become us, and we can join forces and better steward our earth for all. All right, it's after 8 o'clock, Ernie. I know you said that was your goal.
I forgot to unmute. Donna, I'll let you close us out, but I do want to tell you, Erin, again, best wishes in your grandiose global adventures, and I'm sure we'll be seeing and hearing from you in the future, and that you will be doing great things again. And if you come to Charlotte, contact this organization, and we'll get you connected to a college campus or 3 or 4.
Oh yeah, I would love that.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Keep us
thank
on
you
your,
for doing what you're doing. I'm always inspired, right? It's good to find your people, and there's a lot of our people on this call. And I think also, if you know students, Project Green Challenge starts October 1st. High school and college students, projectgreenchallenge.com. You can go and sign up. Okay. You can sign up. Anybody can do it. You'll get things in your inbox every day. It's a very low barrier to entry. But remember, we need the next generation, and we need all generations. And I think that's also something that's so inspiring to me about the environmental movement is, I've learned it from the best, the giants upon whose shoulders I stand. So thank you guys for inviting me. Thank you for the work you're doing. And I hope that we can keep fighting the good fight, arm in arm across the country, and hopefully together one day too.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Erin. And I think your message, especially that we can't do everything, but we can do something. And I think that, you know, when you break it down to that level, you know, if it's bringing your own grocery bags or planting, you know, one oak tree or something like that, it's even if you do one thing, it's going to make a difference, because if enough of us do one thing, it all adds up. That's wonderful. And I do want to just one more thing that that I left off my notes, but Alden reminded me that this Thursday we are having a meet and greet at Birdsong Brewery, and so come out. We'll talk, you know, talk to us about wildlife. We can talk about volunteer opportunities, or we can just, you know, sit down, share beer, and one of the wonderful things about Birdsong is they will donate a portion of their what they take in that night. They will donate a portion of that back to us. So they are a great business. They really support local nonprofits. So we thank them for that. Erin, again, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Good night, everybody. Bye, Erin.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.